Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching this webinar and joining us. Today, we have Jessica Perkins with us, who's a scientist and a harm reduction advocate who leads several science-based advocacy platforms. And she might be a familiar face if you've seen any of our other videos in this series. So Jessica, thank you for being on the other side of the interview today. We're really excited to have you.
No, thank you for having me, Hazel. It's a pleasure to be here, to be interviewed by somebody else for a change.
Yeah, well, we'll get right into it. Even in that short
Yeah.
introduction, you have a science background, you have a background in chemistry and worked as a scientist in a research and development department. Could you share just a little bit more about your background and the sector that you worked in?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I did a degree in chemistry. And then after that, I joined a large multinational company in their risk characterization program, which came under harm reduction. So we were looking at, developing alternative products and safer products for people who smoke. So what I was doing is I was measuring the emissions and the aerosol chemistry from e-cigarette products. And I was comparing that with cigarette smoke to look at the level of toxins. So I was characterizing the aerosol chemistry for a couple of years as a scientist in the lab. And then I moved into innovation, product development, project management, and I worked on snus innovation, on heat not burn innovation, on e-cigarette innovation, really helping to come up with concepts for product pipelines. And I worked on the heat not burn product for Japan as well. There's one in Japan called Glow. So I really came from a science and technology development background. And then I was there for 11 years and I left that to set up my own business because I felt like I needed a new challenge. So I set up a business where I was helping small business entrepreneurs with business strategy and business development. And that was really fun. And I did that for 2 years. And then a mentor of mine and a friend that I had, who was also a scientist, reached out to me because she knew what I was doing. And she knew that I was helping, other small to medium business owners. And she wanted some help with some advocacy work that she was doing in a similar area that we're doing now. So I couldn't resist to help her because I respected and liked her and like her very much. So I came aboard into the advocacy world through wanting to help a mentor, basically. And now I work with advocates in tobacco harm reduction all over the world. So it's been a fun and interesting journey, I would say, and still is.
Wow, that's lovely. And it seems like a very beautiful marriage now of, what you had academic, scientific experience in, and then the advocacy side and how that naturally came about. So that's lovely. And I would be curious to know, are there any particular similarities that you find between the sector of advocacy and research and development or, risk management, that side of things?
Yeah, sure. So the similarity really is the science. I think the science is the connecting bridge where, on the one hand, in the first few roles that I did, I was trying to generate the evidence and generate and do the science and create the evidence. And now in advocacy, I'm now showcasing that evidence or helping to showcase the evidence and the science to governments and policymakers, etc. So I think it's the science and the evidence that's the bridge. So that's the similarity. And obviously now the difference is I'm more in a communications role where I'm trying to communicate the science and the evidence to the right people rather than, do the experiments in the lab. So it's now more communications focused as it is compared with science and product development.
Yeah, wow, very interesting. And when you talk about science, I mean, when we talk about advocacy platforms, we're all familiar with lots of different types of advocacy platforms. It might be narrative based, it might be policy based, and we do a little bit of that as well. But we're very clear about being science based. So I was wondering why it's important to you, or what do you think makes a difference for it to be a science based organization when it comes to the issues that we're looking at?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's important that they're science-based because it's hard to argue against what the science is showing you or telling you. I mean, of course, scientific theories can always be disproven, but they also open up debate within the scientific, medical, and advocacy communities. And if the science and therefore the evidence is compelling and robust, it's hard to then discredit good science if it's done properly. And much of the misinformation and demonization of, for example, nicotine and alternative products is actually not generally underpinned by good science at all. And it's very much opinion-based and scaremongering by those who esteem to a particular ideology within tobacco control groups. So if we can provide strong scientific evidence that then can discount these unsubstantiated opinions, then it's hard to really argue with and ignore.
Wonderful, very clear, and that absolutely makes sense moving forward, absolutely. And another sort of characteristic of the different advocacy platforms that you work with are that they are divided by region as well, which is really lovely to see. And that provides an opportunity to be specific in sort of the science and in the information that goes out. But from your perspective, what are the benefits of it being region-based, and why is it important to have those regions in mind when looking at advocacy?
Absolutely, that's another great question. So just for a bit of background and context, I help to run and lead with our team several regional platforms. So we have a Pan-American Harm Reduction Alliance, which covers, Latin America, Central America, Canada, US. We have ARA, which is our Africa platform. And then we have ASHRA, which is our Asia, Australia, New Zealand platform. And we're soon to launch this year a Middle East platform and a European platform. So that's kind of just some background. I think the benefit of having regional platforms is that you can really tailor the advocacy work to the specific issues of that region. And each region has different issues which need to be addressed. I mean, of course, there are issues that are similar as well, but they also have different issues. And these issues can range from regulatory ones to, misinformation, to physician knowledge about nicotine and alternative products. These things can vary between regions. And of course, the different issues with regards to health, disease rates. So, for example, LMICs or low middle income countries generally have issues that are unique to them, such as access to good healthcare, alternative products, treatment for cancer, etc. So it really helps to divide the regions for those reasons. And you can also mobilize key public health advocates or advocacy groups more effectively, I think, if you create these regional platforms, because they create these communities. So I'd say they're the main reasons why it's beneficial to do that.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. And it's really important, as you've highlighted, to really look at the concerns and not try to do anything too widespread without getting into the details as well, because it's out of concern and care for the countries that you're doing this work and that this work is being done.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And speaking of, countries interacting and working on this issue recently, we had the COP10 summit for the tobacco control policy, the FCTC, recently in Brazil. And that was something that I know, the platforms that you work with did quite a bit of work for and looked at and examined. Is there something that you would like to share with people, or people should know about the COP10 summit that recently happened? Are there any encouragements or any learnings when it comes to harm reduction that we can get out of it?
Yeah, sure, of course. So the COP10 meeting took place the week of the 5th of February, and the aims of that meeting were to assess the progress made by the WHO member states regarding tobacco control measures in their countries. So in terms of the output, what was the final decision of that meeting? So I think there really was a missed opportunity because the COP10 group failed to appoint a work group on tobacco harm reduction strategies, which is an integral part of Article 1D of the FCTC. And the governments of several Caribbean countries did actually urge parties to formally appoint such a work group to learn from best practices of proven public health orientated measures, for example, from other countries that have successfully implemented some tobacco harm reduction strategies. For example, the UK has previously been successful with vaping. Sweden has been very successful with the use of snus and oral nicotine products, and now they've got their smoking rates down to 5.6%. So in actual fact, there were 6 countries that have asked to know more about the THR journeys of these other countries that have been successful. And I should mention Japan as well with heat not burn. So smoking rates and cigarette sales are continuing to decline in Japan because of the measures they've put in. So there are 6 countries that are wanting to learn more about these other countries. And in particular, the Caribbean island of St. Kitts and Nevis have actually proposed to COP10 that there should be a working group on harm reduction strategies so they can study best practices. And then 5 other countries have also asked the same. So that's really, really positive. But yeah, that's it really in a nutshell.
Yeah, wow, thank you for sharing. So there does seem to be a want and an interest and a curiosity because there is misinformation about tobacco harm reduction, but then you clearly see the results in the countries where it's working. And hopefully in the future, we will have more seats at the table for people who are in THR and also more the WHO or the organizers in general wanting to learn more about THR from a science-based perspective as well. But thank you for that summary.
Absolutely. Just to add, and then, COP11. So the key message here is let's continue to advocate for inclusion of all member states, even the ones that are, pro harm reduction and want to have a more open approach. So we need to advocate for inclusion and also of consumer groups because consumers are not being listened to. We need to advocate for engagement and proper science-based risk differentiation between the categories for responsible and effective policy making, essentially.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think, we've been able to talk a little bit about advocacy and harm reduction and sort of zoom in, especially with the COP10. I just want to take a second to zoom out a bit. And for any of our listeners or viewers who are hearing these terms for the first time or just coming into the world of tobacco harm reduction and are starting from scratch, are there any particular resources or information that you would advise them to seek out? Or is there a particular fact that you consider important for them to know about or even pivotal when approaching tobacco harm reduction?
So in terms of resources, I mean, there are quite a few that you can go to. So, for example, we have Clive Bates's website called Counterfactual. He is a very important advocate and he has a fantastic website with a humongous resource of high quality content and evidence pieces, and he has a blog which he regularly updates, so it's all relevant, up to date. So his website is fantastic. There's also one of the most cited researchers in e-cigarette science is Dr. Konstantinos Varsalinos of Greece. He's a cardiologist, and he has a website called ecigaretteresearch.org, and he has published many papers on the science of vaping, etc., and e-cigarette research. So please do look at those. We also have tobaccoharmreduction.net or THR.net, which is great for new advocates, for example, and even experienced advocates. We have an advocacy toolkit. That's one of the platforms that we lead as a team, and I'm one of those people. And we have scientific information on the different products and all sorts of news and relevant updates as well on the updates page. So that's relevant information that's being posted every week, pretty much. And then we also have our regional platforms if you want to look at more regional issues, like the PAHRA, PAHRA, which is our, Pan-American region. We have ARA, AHRA, and then we have ASHRA, ASHRA. So I'd look at those platforms, and then we have smokefreesweden.org as well to look at these the Swedish case study for what's unique about Sweden, and we have several reports and some great several reports and resources on there that people can read about Sweden in particular and how they've managed to drive their smoking rates down to such a low level. So I would say they're probably the best resources to start with.
Wow, thank you. So it seems that when you're in the field or when you're looking to know more, there are amazing resources that are science-based to seek out. It's just
Absolutely.
about getting into it, and also a lot of acronyms. We love our acronyms, so getting used to the
Yeah.
acronyms as well.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And with tobaccoharmreduction.net specifically, just curious if there's anything you can tell us about maybe in the next weeks or months or years, even what's something that's coming up, what's something, people who have been following or would like to follow would be excited to hear about.
Sure. So this year we look forward to more webinar guest speakers. So, and we're going to be focusing more on nicotine this year as well, because there's lots of myths and misinformation and disinformation about nicotine. And we find that many people are misinformed about, the safety of nicotine. So many people think nicotine causes cancer, for example. So this year we really want to educate the public and policymakers about the truth of nicotine and that it's very similar to caffeine, etc. So that's going to be a big push this year. We have many women in THR episodes coming up with champions in all of those regions that I've mentioned. We have one next week with a fantastic lady in South Africa, and then we have one with a toxicologist from Brazil. So they're the ones that are imminent. We'll have many more this year. And then we also have a webinar series called #THR Champions, which include experts from all over the world. And we're going to be launching our next episode at the end of March. And then we'll do many more this year as well. So we'll focus on COP10, COP11, on nicotine, and on other science-related content. And we're also going to be launching a report about smoke-free New Zealand. So we are going to, we've talked about Sweden a lot, and we're going to continue to talk about Sweden, but we're going to open up the discussion about New Zealand, because New Zealand have managed to drive their smoking rates down to just over 6% with vaping. That's a really interesting case study that we're going to amplify this year. So stay tuned for those.
Amazing. So it seems like there's a lot to look forward to and a lot to hear more about and journey with you. So where can people know more about this? With social media or the websites, what's the best way to get connected to these platforms?
I think the best way is our X platform, so thr.net. You can follow us on X. We regularly upload content daily. And we also link to the website if there's a new article or a new report. We'll always showcase it on X. So I think that's the first place to go to. We also have a LinkedIn page. So if you prefer LinkedIn, then we have that option. And then I think the website. And then the other platforms, we have websites and the X channels for each of those as well. So we can always put those in the description below when this video goes live on YouTube, and then we can put links to those platforms.
Amazing, wonderful. And we look forward to having more people connect to these platforms and learn with us as we put out more science-based information as well. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And perhaps as a final question, we've kind of journeyed through harm reduction as itself and harm reduction and its journey with you and recent updates and things that we'd like to change and things that are looking well. Just as a final, perhaps more personal question still related to harm reduction, what are you excited about recently in the world of tobacco harm reduction? Is there a particular, country or study that gives us hope that things are going in the right direction, or harm reduction is being used the way it should be?
Yeah, I'm excited about these 6 countries who have asked COP to look at other harm reduction strategies implemented by these other countries like the UK, like Japan, like New Zealand, like Sweden. I'm encouraged by that to see where that goes for COP11. I'm really excited to see where we go with Sweden this year and what happens there in terms of the smoking rates. Can we get them down, and will they go down any further? And also with New Zealand, I'm excited to study New Zealand. It's a really interesting case study. That's going to be a scientific, but a really digestible report that we're going to produce this year. I'm excited for that. And also we're going to be producing a report about nicotine. And that's going to be really interesting because we're going to go into the science of nicotine the therapeutic benefits of using nicotine. There's lots of interesting research going on. In the US, one of those areas where there's a psychiatrist called Dr. Paul Newhouse, who is looking into how nicotine can slow down cognitive impairment in Alzheimer's patients and actually or
Wow.
slow down memory loss. So there's lots of really interesting work going on with nicotine and the benefits of that molecule. So I'm really interested to focus on New Zealand, seeing what more we can do with Sweden this year, and nicotine, to be honest with you, and then seeing what happens with COP11, but that's a bit more in the future.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. And we hope to maybe even do a catch up with you in a couple months or a year's time and see how those elements that you've talked about today have progressed. I'm sure people would be excited to see how much a few months can make a difference when it comes to advocacy and harm reduction. So that's
Absolutely.
exciting.
Thank you, Hazel. It was a pleasure, and I'll interview you at some point as well.
Great. Sounds good.